So, these notes are recorded. Every day that we do notes, I will record them. Everything that goes onto this screen will be captured along with audio, and I put it up on my YouTube channel. So if you miss class, I'll tell you, go get the notes. They're on the YouTube channel. It's typically a 15 or 20-minute video you can watch, and you didn't have to miss a day of class. So it's not as good as being here because we do more fun stuff here, but it's better than nothing. So how does this happen? We have to back up to get some other concepts in here. And here's the background that we have to be aware of. Antibiotics are a specific type of drug that kills bacteria. Some bacteria are not killed by antibiotics. Bacteria that are not killed by antibiotics are called resistant. Resistant bacteria may be resistant to a drug due to slight differences in their cell structure. And bacteria's cell structure is determined by the genes contained in their DNA. A lot of this just kind of revisits points from the film, points from our discussion. So, you know what antibiotics are. You know that there are bacteria that are not killed by antibiotics. We know that those are called resistant. I think the last two might be the ones that are the furthest off what you already know. A lot of the time, the resistant bacteria are resistant because there's some difference in their cell wall. Very often, that's, something about their cell structure is a little bit different, and that's what allows them to resist the antibiotic. And I don't know how much you've had about DNA. We'll talk a lot more about that this year. But their cell structure is actually built by using instructions in their DNA. And so those differences in their DNA mean differences in their cell structure, and those differences are what allow some of them to survive antibiotics. What are bacteria? They are single-celled prokaryotes, which is a lot like saying, she is a female woman. All prokaryotes are single-celled. There are no multi-celled prokaryotes. They're all one-celled. Prokaryotes have no nucleus. They just have a piece of DNA, a cell wall, and some ribosomes. They reproduce asexually to produce offspring just like themselves, usually. And that reproductive process is called binary fission. The prefix bi refers to how many. Answer with fingers. Hold up fingers. 2. 2. Bi is 2. Uni is 1. Bi is 2. Tri is 3. Bicycle has 2 wheels. So bi means 2. I think a lot of this you kind of knew. Did you talk about bacteria at some point in science somewhere else? No? Not in middle school science anywhere? Did you talk about cells in middle school science? Okay. So they are prokaryotes. Pro, and a lot of you put pro, good at something, pro, like a professional, which is true. But in this case, pro means something different. Pro means the first. So have you heard of a prototype? Do you know what a prototype is? What's a prototype?
It's a test.
It's a test model. Yeah. Like, hey, we designed this crazy thing out in my garage. We built a prototype. We're going to see if it blows up or goes. The prototype is the first model. It's the first kind. Prokaryotes are the most primitive. They are the first kind of cell. They're these primitive cells. Now, that said, they're still pretty interesting and complicated. I mean, heck, this one's got a tail. It's got a flagella. It can move. That's cool. It's got a cell wall. You don't have a cell wall. Look at you. You think you're all fancy. You don't have a cell wall. This bacteria's got a cell wall. So they are an early primitive kind of cell, but they still can do a lot in the world. And their DNA, so your DNA is neatly stored in every single one of your cells, wrapped up around proteins, folded, imagine taking all your t-shirts, folding them very neatly, putting them in the drawer, color-coded, lined up, just so. Not mine either. Bacterial DNA is just a single t-shirt, and it's just thrown in there. And it's messy, and it's rumpled, it's not stored neatly, but it's just one t-shirt, so it doesn't matter much. You've got a lot more t-shirts in your drawer than this bacteria does. So, this that they show here is just a big, long coil of DNA, kind of all bunched up. Okay. Moving right along. What does the bacteria have to do to survive around here? Because all they want is to survive. That's all anything in this world wants. Biology is all about staying alive and reproducing. That's it. What do bacteria have to do to survive? They have to stay wet. Maintain stable conditions, homeostasis. They have to maintain their water balance, not lose water to the environment, not dehydrate. They have to stay at the right temperature. Again, homeostasis. Not too hot, not too cold. Too hot will change the proteins in their cell wall like you're cooking an egg. Too cold, they freeze and their cell walls will burst. And they have to make more bacteria. Requires copying their DNA, making more cell wall proteins, and making cytoplasm. And reproducing doesn't mean that any individual bacteria will survive, but it means that as a species, they will survive. Okay. So homeostasis, this word comes up. You had it in your vocabulary. And some of you focused in on that word stasis, stay, and you found that it meant maintaining stable internal conditions. And a bacteria has to do it or they die. And you have to do it or you die. And a maple tree has to do it or it dies. And a mouse has to do it or it dies. And a dragonfly and a butterfly and a ladybug and a cockroach and an earthworm and a pinworm and a tapeworm and let's see, a smallmouth bass and a spotted turtle and everything. Every living thing on this planet has to maintain stable internal conditions one way or another, or it dies. And you, the fine, complicated, multicellular organisms that you are, have a lot of ways to do that. So, all living things, you know that you're fatty water bags, right? I haven't called you that yet. I'll call you that. I'll call you mutants. I'm a fatty water bag. You're a fatty water bag. Trees are fatty water bags. Whales are fatty water bags. Mice are fatty water bags. Earthworms are fatty water bags. Why do I say that? Because guess what you're made up of? Water. Well, you're made up of little tiny bags, and the outside of the bag is made of fat, and the inside of the bag is mostly water. Fatty water bags. We're all fatty water bags. Your cells are these little bags made of fat. It's called a phospholipid. It's a special kind of fat. Lipid is a fat. So olive oil is a lipid, butter's a lipid, Crisco's a lipid, and the phospholipids that make up your cell walls are lipids. Every single living thing on this planet has to keep the water in the cell where it belongs. So you have to not have too much water or the cell bursts like has anybody here overfilled a water balloon? Yeah, imagine that happening to cells in your body. It's not good. If you leave, if you leave something in water long enough, in fresh water, it will absorb liquid into its cells and its cells can burst. So you have to have a way to guard against that. If you dry something out, it will desiccate, the water will leave its cell, and then it's dead. It can't function. So you have ways of maintaining your water balance. Anybody ever have heat exhaustion or heat stroke here? Okay. So, I lived in Arizona for a while. Tucson, Arizona. The day I moved to Tucson, Arizona, it was in June. That was really, really smart of me. Girl from Ohio lands in Tucson. It was 117 degrees. day I got there. 6% humidity. Here in the summer, it's usually like 80% humidity, 75 to 90% humidity. We have days that are 95% humidity. When you walk out of the door and it feels like you just walked into a warm, wet towel. So, 117 degrees and 6% humidity. Every drop of water that's outside evaporates. As a matter of fact, water evaporates so fast that there's something called viraga, where rain falls out of the sky, but it evaporates before it can hit the ground, so you can stand under a cloud and stare up and see the rain coming down at you, but it never touches you because it evaporates. And a friend of mine who had lived in Tucson before said to me, "You need a bottle of water in your hand." And I said, "No, I'm not thirsty right now, thanks." And she said, "You didn't hear me. You need a glass of water or a bottle of water or something in your hand right now." And I said, No, I'm fine. Dumb girl from Ohio. Yeah, you need water in your hand and in your mouth at all times because 117 degrees and 6% humidity is aggressively drying you out. And I quickly discovered that when you stop peeing, and next what happens? You've had heat stroke. What happens next? First you stop peeing, then what happens? Well, no, you stop sweating. So you stop peeing, then you stop sweating because your body is holding on to every precious drop of water it can get. Then you fall over. Falling over comes after the no peeing, no sweating, and then usually the goosebumps and the chills, and then the falling over. Because your body has systems to conserve water. You're maintaining homeostasis. Guess what kind of systems bacteria have for maintaining homeostasis? Just their cell wall. That's all they have. They don't have complicated systems for keeping their water balance. But yet they have to, because if they don't, they'll die. If you dry out bacteria, they will die. That's nice to know. Salt will dry them out really quickly. Has anybody here made jerky? Okay, what are you doing with jerky? You're putting salt on meat, and what are you drawing out of every single cell in that meat? Moisture. You're drawing out water. Salt draws water out of cells. Okay, so they have to stay wet. They have to maintain their water balance. Just enough water, not too much water. They also have to stay at the right temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. You do this through sweating and shivering. Guess how bacteria do it? They can't do a thing. Guess what happens if they get too hot? So, what's this? Raw egg. Who here has cooked an egg? Good. You have homework. Go cook an egg. Go home and cook an egg. If you haven't ever cooked an egg, you should go home and cook an egg. Cook an egg! Why does this egg look different from this egg? Because the proteins in this egg were changed by heat. The proteins in this egg were changed by heat, and now this is rigid, it can't move, it can't flow around. I left this out overnight by accident, it's a little stinky. Hey, you do have homework. Part C for words number 1, 2, 6, and 14. It will be on Classroom. Have a good night, folks. 1, 2, 6, and 14.